There we are. We are live. So you want to start off and introduce yourselves and all that?
All right, everyone. As far as I'm aware, this is the panel for work-life balance. Let's go around and start introducing ourselves. Natasha, would you be so kind to lead us off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Natasha. I at the moment write in crime fiction, but I do kind of branch out a little bit every now and again to different genres, depending on kind of what I feel like. So my current project is a travel memoir, but the two I have published are crime fiction. And that is in and around my day job and also working as a freelance editor, and also being a mum to a toddler. So work-life balance is literally my jam. It's very, very busy all round, basically.
Very nice. Good to have you. Thank you.
You want me to go next?
That'd be great, Rebecca. Thank you.
Okay, yes. I'm Rebecca. I write fantasy. My day job is as an archivist, and I also have two kids who are 8 and 13, so it's a lot to balance.
I can go next. I'm Tamar Marie. I'm an editor, translator, and author. I write in the endangered language of Western Armenian, and I do a lot of translating from that endangered language into English. I have a company that helps authors and publishers produce books, both in English and Armenian. So I support authors through editing, copy editing, writing coaching, and I support publishing houses with the same, particularly for those that have series connected to anything related to Armenian themes. I've been doing this work over 20 years and raised 2 kids as a single mom while doing it. So work and life balance has been something that has, until today, occupies my everyday kind of thoughts and intentions. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
We're very lucky and happy to have you. So we have a few other people here. Hyrolf, I don't know if you have anything being presented. Same with pizza. But those are two that I know from the Story Valley Discord here.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Orlando. I am an amateur author. I came into the conference by kind of being in Story Valley, just communicating and doing everything there. Doing a lot of submissions into crit and just kind of chugging along. Thankfully, got my first manuscript. Let's go with that. Published this year in a, what do we call that? Compilation? An anthology. So that was nice. And now am lending my efforts to this wonderful panel. All right. I know we're all pretty eager. This is the panel for work-life balance. A lot of that has to do with managing time. So let's go ahead and start off just very gently here. It looks like a lot of our speakers do have some constraints when it comes to very tangible things, and those are family. And let me tell you, even if you've got a small family, I've got a lot of fur babies, so those take time, either just with care, surprise veterinary visits, who knows. And not everything can be planned for. So it pays very much to be flexible. I'll tell you what.
And you kind of learn to find time for writing when other things are going on. For instance, like my daughter has a gymnastics class, and I will take my laptop with me and sit and write while she's doing gymnastics, or even when I'm at my day job doing something that doesn't require a lot of brain power, I will be thinking about my writing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. I find that it's those moments when you're out of the house somewhere else and you know there's a limited amount of time to do something. Like when you're talking about the gymnastics class, I find that's when I'm most productive. Like if I've got a 15-20 minute train journey, all of a sudden I'm really in the zone and able to get out a couple hundred words or something, or solve a plot point, or just get something written, even if it's absolute trash, which is quite nice, actually.
Yeah, there's a little something I always have in the back of my head. You can daydream and think about your story all you want, but unless it is in black and white somewhere, you can't work on it. So write it down. Even if you get a few hundred words, just write it down.
Yeah, so it's something even like as small as that, it's progress, right? And that's what I think a lot of people kind of get caught up on, is they want to get to the next milestone but actually don't make any progress. So it's like carving out those little snippets of time as and when possible. I mean, I often save all of my work in my Dropbox folder so that I can access it when I'm on my phone or on my laptop or where. And I've actually written like entire chapters in bed at like 1 o'clock in the morning, just frantically typing away on my phone because something's hit. And my little one's like he's been awake in the night, so I've been resettling him, and I'm awake and thinking, and I'm like, I've just got to write this down. But progress is progress, right? It doesn't matter what form it takes.
I agree.
I agree with all of you too. And one thing that I do when I have clients or authors that I'm working with that becomes really helpful in regards to this question is that, a lot of people have this impression that writing is about inspiration, right? Like I have to be inspired about something. And, when I get inspired or I have an idea, then I could continue to write or sit down to write. And to me, that's actually not the way writing works if you're serious about writing. And there's many ways that we could actually get inspired. And one of those ways is this technique called turning your writer on. And what it is conditioning your brain to be creative at a particular time of day, every single day. And creating even the smallest amount of time, like Rebecca, Natasha, Orlando, you're speaking of, I think is the most important way to approach something like this, particularly because we have no time. So generally when most people approach writing, they say, okay, so I'm going to be inspired and I'm going to write. And next thing you know, it's been 3 months, 6 months, a year, and you're still trying to write that book, right? I have 6 books. I've written them all by writing 30 minutes to an hour a day. That's it. You know, I didn't have more time, but that small increment of time over a long period does add up, right? So one of the things that I think is important is finding realistically, being honest with yourself and saying, what is the time of day that I could probably carve out 30 minutes, even 15 minutes for myself? And that is your sacred hour. That's the time nobody else gets. That's for you and your writing. That is to develop your relationship for your writing long term. And the commitment, even if you start by saying that I'm going to commit to at least 4 days or 3 days to write at that time every day, you will find that you will be more productive working that way than in any other way that you could possibly work, because that commitment alone, even just showing up, even if that means you write nothing that day, even if that means you're staring out the window for 15 minutes, over time, I guarantee you that you're eventually going to start writing things. And then you're going to find yourself being motivated by the things that you write. And then that is going to turn into a practice where every time you sit down at that hour, whatever that may be, for some people that's 10 p.m., for some people that's 5 a.m., for some people that's 3 in the afternoon, that your writer is going to turn on, and you're going to find that relationship develop into this kind of pattern where you're able to create consistently. And when you're able to create consistently, you feel even more motivated to continue on your writing path. So I think this is one way that's worked for me and other people that I've worked with. And I didn't want to share that with all of you. And it's something we can continue to talk about, or, you know, something that we can tangent off of. But that's what has helped me over the years in my career.
I think I've actually done that without intending to.
Beautiful.
No
Yeah,
accidents.
No, I was just thinking I do that as well, but actually I can tell when I've slipped, and like it's like that slippery slope of like maintaining a habit, isn't it? Where you get into that routine, and then
Right.
as soon as you kind of, it's like when you, like, you know, like exercising, as soon as you miss like a couple of days, you start to then get lazy, and like you have to then like retrain yourself to get back into it. But what I think was really interesting with what you were saying was about the whole like the ideas. I think a lot of people get caught up on the whole, well, I don't have an idea to write today, so I just won't write because I'm going to wait for that idea to come to me. Whereas like that whole sitting down writing, whether you stare out the window or write a few hundred or write literally a sentence, I find pushing through that magically starts to then actually ideate on its own, almost like, you know, you just got to get past that. Well, it's writer's block, right? That's essentially what that is. But yeah, that regular just sitting down and doing it, no procrastinating, no excuses, just doing it.
Yeah. Right.
Personally, I've found, Natasha, that works for me pretty brilliantly. You know what? No, I don't understand how I'm going to write around this certain problem that I'm having. But you know what I can do? I can write about how much it frustrates me. I can write about how I think one character is going to approach it versus another. And usually, you know, I'll give myself 10 minutes. But just kind of exploring that, you find some different avenues that you really didn't see 10, 15 minutes before. And I'm like, you know, that's worth fighting 10 to 15 minutes on paper, trying to figure out where I'm going. You find your way.
Yeah. I find as well, like with crime fiction, it has to be really particularly well plotted in order to kind of like maintain pace and momentum, and you have to lay like little like breadcrumb clues and stuff at the right moments, and kind of like
Yes.
it ends up becoming complicated. And you get to a point where you kind of hit that moment where it's like, well, I actually don't really know where to go next. And it becomes a case of, okay, well, this is a list of, I've now actually started writing a list of every time I slip something in, so that I'm finding that I then have less of those moments where I'm like, well, where do I go next? Because I've already done the work in the previous like 20 chapters or whatever we're looking at, which I find is actually so helpful. When I do find that I get like really stalled with those where do I go next, what do I do moments.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, I forgot to mention that I also write fantasy, and Rebecca, you do too. And I found that in terms of constructing like world building, Natasha, that it has a similar structure to crime, right? Like crime writing, because you have to do a similar kind of breadcrumbing, and the pacing of the information that you have to provide to the reader between the different kinds of storylines, right, that you're connecting.
Yeah.
I've been in that position too, and I think it's true, because it's not like, it's the hard moments that you have to push through, like you're even saying, Orlando, you know. And sometimes that takes a couple days, and sometimes it takes a week, but it's kind of just like being almost determined, like even at, you know, like a men, like at the gym, right, like being determined to push through that kind of I don't know, not as active writing or whatever that's going on with you, you know, as a writer.
Yeah, so I mean, so I did creative writing at university, so I have a few friends from uni that obviously have the same background as me, but are definitely less active in like writing, even like as a hobby or anything like that. And they did say the last time I saw them, they actually said to me, they're like, you know, how do you find the time? And I was literally like, I just do. Like, if you want it enough, at the end of the day, you will carve out those 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it is, to do it. So it's, you know, you find that I was doing what they were doing. I was spending an awful lot of time being like, oh, I really wish I found the time to write. I don't have any ideas right now, or all of that sort of stuff. Where it's actually, if I just did it, and just got over that, like it's like a fear, isn't it? It's like a self-doubt. Like if I just push through it and I just deal with it, then all of a sudden we're on the other side of it and it's no longer a problem.
I'd like to talk more about that side of it, about the setting priorities and how you know when it's like, yes, this is the time to write, and then, okay, this is the time I've got to wash the dishes, the kids need to eat, and how you know, balance, how you make those decisions.
That's a really good question.
For me, I sometimes, and especially in the past, I've felt guilty about the time that I spend writing, because I think, oh, you know, my kids are only going to be young once and all that kind of thing. But I also think I want them to grow up and feel like they can do things that are important to them, and I'm setting an example for them by doing what's important for me and prioritizing what's important for me, and showing them that they're not the center of the universe. Obviously, they're still very important, and not neglecting them, but
I love that. But like, I think that is the parental battle about everything, right? Is it is always, it is everything, literally everything. It comes down to that. I mean, I'm fairly lucky in the sense of, because my little one's only 2, he goes to bed fairly early. So for me, a lot of what I do ends up being post his bedtime. You know, I have quite a lengthy evening once he's in bed, and then it's a case of I only have to balance it between spending time with my husband and writing, as opposed to spending time with my husband, writing, doing fun stuff with my kids, spending time with him. And so all of a sudden it shrinks down. If I've got slightly less responsibilities to juggle. Otherwise, I think it would be much, much harder and just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and I think like you know, you mentioned it's hard. Like, I think it evolves, like, as your kids get older, like that structure looks different. But one thing I always did is I involved my kids in the process. Like, for example, like, it sounds strange, but I told them my schedule. Like, so I got them excited about my writing and like my journey, you know. So yeah, mom's gonna write for like an hour and she would like some uninterrupted writing time. And then, you know what I mean? Then we're gonna do this. So it wasn't like they felt like they weren't included in the journey. Like, I included them in the journey, like, and they were like rooting for me and I was rooting for them and things that they wanted. And that, I mean, it's a challenge. Obviously, we can all first start by saying it's incredibly challenging to be a mom, to be a parent or a caretaker, and to be able to create and find work-life balance, right? And every person finds that balance in their own way, and that's whatever works for them and their family. But I think that worked really well for me. And as my kids grew up, they found that respect for my boundary. Like, and I would hear them say, you know, like, oh, okay, mom's writing. And then I'll say, yeah, I'm going to take another hour of writing today, you know? And they grew up to respect that. And it taught them to also respect other people's space, creative spaces and boundaries, you know? So that's one thing that I remember that was helpful for me.
I really like that, actually. That's a really good way of doing. You know, we do a lot of this sounds silly, but like things like we do house chores whilst he's awake and present, so that he can see that, you know, the house doesn't get magically hoovered when he's asleep.
Right.
The dishwasher like actually needs loading, all of that sort of stuff. So he sees the general caretaking that goes into having a home. So the fact that you kind of did that with your creative boundaries as well, I think is actually pretty genius, really. And then it just becomes a norm. It just becomes like part of life. That is something that mum or dad or whoever does. And like you said, they kind of then grow up with that respect for those boundaries and probably a little bit of admiration as well, actually, that you know, that parent takes time to do X, whether that's, you know, writing or art or whatever creative outlet. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, and I think, oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca, you go first.
Go ahead. Okay. And then you also have to be able to, I guess, be understanding and forgiving of yourself because you're not always going to get that balance right. There's going to be a time when you're really fired up to write and you got to get the kid to the soccer game, or there's going to be a time when your kid really wants to play a board game with you, but you've got to get, you know, your writing time in, and that's okay. That's still, you're not a failure because you're not spending every moment in the optimal way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really the stories that we write and tell ourselves too that help us move forward, right? Like, oh my God, I only wrote 15 minutes today, or I wrote 15 minutes today, but it was productive in its own way, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Natasha, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. I think that's like, Becca, that is like the biggest thing, because like for me, I get like this real big motivation, like probably in the middle of the afternoon, thinking, oh, tonight I'm going to sit down my laptop. I really want to like make good headway on where I'm at. And then by the time we've got to the end of my work day and we've done dinner time and we've done bedtime routine, I actually sit down. And the last thing I want to do is then actually open my laptop, because I'm feeling so mentally drained.
Mm-hmm.
that fire that I had earlier has gone. And then that's when we have the whole, I've gone like a week or 2 weeks without actually having carved out that routine. And then we've slipped. That for me is probably the biggest thing, is kind of maintaining the motivation for later on, so that when I can get to it, I'm still ready to keep going.
If you don't mind, Natasha, Tamar, Rebecca, I do have a question for you regarding that topic. Let's say that you got a just a coal, a burning ember of inspiration, but you have your writing time scheduled for maybe 2 hours from that moment. How do you keep that motivation burning brightly, or keep it to the point where you can produce on it?
I think everyone's situation is different, and depending on, like, as a caretaker, the demands on you at that moment. But if that happened to me today, I'd probably rearrange my schedule and write then. But I have the luxury of doing that now. Prior to this, no, I couldn't do that. You know what I mean? I also, if I had a partner that was helping me raise my children, I probably would seek out their help and say, hey, you know what, can we switch or something? Or can you get this right now? I personally like to prioritize those moments if I can. But if I can't, then either writing it down or something like that for later, and giving myself grace if I can't do it in that moment, you know, because sometimes it's absolutely difficult to even try to get to it. Voice memos have helped too. I don't know if people use that, but that's something I've used before.
Yeah, that's along the lines of what I was going to say, which is if you can even just write down, 3 sentences to capture the idea. So when you do have the time, you're not thinking, oh, what was that great idea I had 3 hours ago? I can have at least something that's going to trigger that memory. And okay, that's what it was, because that counts as progress, even if you don't maybe don't have the ideal session you were hoping for.
Yeah, I even have an app that is essentially kind of designed for well, it's designed is primarily built for fantasy writing. So it's got loads of elements in there where you can kind of do the world building bits and stuff. But essentially I use that as my like note dump, but also use it to kind of coordinate like my characters, my chapters and stuff. So if I have like a eureka moment, I've got somewhere that I can put it. But like that motivation bit that you kind of asked about, I think comes back to that whole, you kind of have to just sit down and force yourself to do it, and then hope that kind of burning desire of motivation will kind of come back. At least that's what I find. Within 5 to 10 minutes of sitting down, if I'm like, oh, I can't really be bothered, but I had this really good idea. Once I've got past those first 5-10 minutes, and then find that I'm kind of in the rhythm of writing again, and actually the motivation kind of picks itself back up again, which is actually quite nice.
Thank you. Those are amazing answers. Personally, when it comes to, hey, I need to find some time to write, I always use my car trips and will take down voice memos because everyone else is just going to think I'm singing along with music, right?
I think an interesting part about writing too, especially when we're thinking about blocks or creating, is it's actually our developing our relationship with our writing is really developing our relationship with ourselves. And I think blocks are sometimes things that we're struggling internally. I have done so much work on myself as a writer, just thinking about the challenges I'm having with my writing that end up becoming mirrors for things that I'm trying to work on to better myself. When this comes to bringing it back to like work-life balance and being a single mom with small children and having to do this work both for myself and for pay, right? Because in my case as well, and I think Natasha and some of you also are doing this work for pay, like carving out the time to do both the creative work and more of the kind of deliberative work. You start to kind of find out more about how you work, where your creativity sparks, what things that allow you room, or what situations allow you room to feel more creative. What kind of dynamics do you feel, or what kind of days do you feel less creative? And I think that's worth exploring. you know, both on an individual level and as a creative, you know.
This is more personal to me, but like Natasha, I went to college for creative writing, and then for many years I didn't really accomplish anything with it, and just kind of figured, oh, I'm not cut out for this. It's just, I'm just going to fail at this. And then when I was 36, I was diagnosed with ADHD and found out, oh, there's this thing about how my brain works that's holding me back, and I can do something about it. So that learning lessons about yourself and how you work really resonates with me.
Yeah, for example, when I was married, like I didn't write a word for 5 years, you know, and that was really telling about where I was in my life and why I had such a creative block. And yeah, thank you for sharing, Rebecca. I appreciate that story as well.
Yeah, I think the support network you have actually can play like quite a big role. So you kind of mentioned there that like when you were married, it wasn't, you had a creative block and it kind of didn't happen. And like again, and what you said, Rebecca, about having like a really long time of not writing. And I kind of had the same thing actually. Like I came out of uni and then didn't really do any writing for about 10 years. Like in any kind of format outside of my day-to-day job. And then it was only when I kind of decided that I wanted to pick it back up again did I realize that I had like a network around me of people who were really supportive of that. And actually I think that also makes a really big difference in kind of what you can kind of achieve, whether that's like friends or family or colleagues or whatever format that takes. But I think that can play a big role into how motivated you feel to kind of pursue it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. Part of the story has definitely shown me that being in a community of like-minded people can really kind of like one pick you up when you're feeling down, but can also serve as that external motivator. You know, you get to hear that other people are progressing, want to progress too. Um, I don't know, peer pressure, maybe.
Uh-huh.
That's probably a nicer word for it when it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
I just cannot
Yeah, I
think about
agree.
it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, the first person to get it.
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah, that's nice.
Mhm.
Something that we've kind of, I don't think we've really touched on yet really, is kind of like the burnout side of it. So like whilst obviously it's great to kind of squeeze in all of that time to make space for that writing, for me I find burnout is probably my greatest weakness, so that when I'm like if I'm doing it too much for too prolonged a period of time, all of a sudden it's almost like I go off the end of a cliff where I'd maybe pushed myself too hard, especially because I like to work to word counts rather than time frames, which is probably actually not as healthy as it should be really. But I do find that burnout can be the biggest issue, essentially not finding the time but actually burning out from spending too much time on it.
So this is a really good topic. Not only are we talking about work-life balance with writing, but when you have time set aside for writing, but you feel like you're constantly hitting a wall of no progress, that can lead to a lot of negative things. Demotivation, imposter syndrome can set in. What have you guys found is like some of your go-to ways for overcoming burnout and or writer's block?
I would say being this is another case where you have to be forgiving of yourself and understanding your situation, what you're up to, because it can sometimes
Yeah.
be hard to tell when it's something you should push through or when it's a time where you just need the rest. And it's hard to tell those apart sometimes.
That's a good point. A lot of the time, as authors, we're telling ourselves like, okay, you know, character X, character Y, they just went through something huge. Let's give them a break. It's like, okay, well, you as the author just went through something huge. You need a break.
Yeah.
Take that time.
I think it's also important to be flexible in those moments and give yourself grace. Like, you know, sometimes I'll sit down and I always try to plan ahead what I'm doing for my writing time the next day. Like, so that when I'm sitting there, I'm not wondering, you know, what I'm doing. But sometimes I don't feel like doing the thing that I said that I was going to do yesterday, or continuing that part of the story, or you know, writing on something. So I decide, you know, I'm gonna read instead. And I think that that's also acceptable. You know what I mean? Or I'm gonna work on something else that I think that sort of writing will help me figure out this part of my story or what I'm trying to work on. So I think that flexibility and grace is also really important. Or I'm gonna watch a show. Like, I watch a lot of crime shows as a fantasy writer. I find that really helps.
Um, I stumbled onto a bit of aid that said, hey, you know, a lot of writers get this illusion in their head that they need to write their book where it goes from A to Z, you know, one direction. And then I finally got this advice that said, no, you don't. You can stop in the middle and then just go write the ending if you want. You can stop in the first quarter and write that third quarter tentpole event if you want. In your editing, in your second draft, you're going to be able to make all of those little events that you got really excited about writing about mesh together. So you really don't need to you really don't need to focus solely. No, I need to write exactly what comes after event B, and then event C, and then event B. It's like, well, you're not playing a game of dominoes. You can be nice with yourself. Give yourself grace. Get yourself to a new part of the story that you know exactly how to write, or it's just been bugging you for weeks on end.
Yeah, I think there's a quote by Leslie Marmon Silko that says that writing is all about expressing yourself every day, and then eventually you figure out how the pieces come together. You know?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a resource in Story Valley. He will remind us very diligently that the act of writing is also the discipline of making decisions.
Yeah, I like that.
So a little earlier, I'm sorry if it was Natasha, Rebecca, Tamara. We're all having a great discussion here, but there was a slight touch on. Well, I decided to keep everything in Dropbox so that I can access it everywhere. What other mediums do you prefer to write in specifically for that accessibility across multiple devices?
I use Google Docs for the same reason. So everything's in the cloud, and I can, whatever computer or device that I have access to, I can access it.
That's been my go-to as well. And thankfully, Google Docs also makes it pretty easy to share material.
I don't
It's weird.
use. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go on, you go.
I was just gonna say I don't use Docs, but I put my writing there just to have it accessible elsewhere in case something happens. I mean, like as a backup, as one of the
Oh,
backup.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like to write on my laptop because I primarily write in the same spot every day, actually. That's just my personality. I'm comforted by writing in the same spot every day. I feels chaotic to me to move locations to write or like move my computer or things like that. But that's just because my personality is like that.
I think there is something to be said though for like having a space to do that. Like so I have a home office that was initially set up to be a writing space, and then COVID happened and it's now my work from home space. But because of all of that, it now feels like it almost can't be my writing space because I spend Monday to Friday 9 to 5 in this room, that I do then actually feel that I have to be physically somewhere
Yeah.
else, even if that happens to be on the sofa. I mean, it's almost the reverse of what you're saying. So where you have to be in one position, I have to be anywhere but in the office.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
like, and I go so far as I will literally, there is a hotel across the road from me, and I will literally go and spend like an hour or two in their front lobby just so that I don't have to be in my house where there's like the washing that can be done, or stuff in the kitchen that needs to be washed up.
Yeah.
Like, I can just get that space to mentally be able to be like, right, this is me writing now.
Yeah, in that regard too. So for those of you that have like smaller kids, when I had my kids were smaller, I literally had, let's say, from 9 to 3 to work. Like one thing about discipline too is I think disciplining yourself. Like I wouldn't take phone calls during that time, like unless they were work related, but really prioritizing your writing and the space and the time that you have to do it, because if you know that you only have 4 hours or 6 hours, you don't want to at the end of that time like feel angry or resentful of how you spent that time. So you can be much more intentional with that time, and you'll feel like I used to feel like I was much more productive actually, and had my schedule more intact. Like, okay, but after, like, there were years I didn't work after 3. And if there were things I had to finish, it would happen like after 10 when my kids, or like 7 or whatever bedtime was at that particular age. But prioritizing your time and yourself is where, you have to do that. Like, it's very important, I think, to the success of your craft and your relationship with your craft.
I agree. Maintaining progress is it's that goal that we're always trying to make sure that we're heading towards. Um, brand new. So what advice would you give to a brand new writer who would come to you, say, I have this idea for a great story. Um, I just there's only so much time I could dedicate to it every day. What would you tell that person?
First off, it's not a race. If you can devote even like 15 minutes a day or even 4 days a week, you will eventually have a book. I haven't like done the math to say how long that is, but there's nobody watching the clock and saying if you don't have your book out by December 31st, 2024, then it's too late. So if you can find even a little bit of time to devote to it now, that's going to pay off in the future, and your situation isn't always going to be what it is now.
That's brilliant. I love it. Like we all kind of have this like invisible boogeyman over our shoulders, right? That's just our like ego subconscious. But yeah, you're right. The only timeline you have is when you get your son.
The other side of that too is, who is the audience that you're imagining reading your book? One of my books that I wrote to get tenure, I had imagined this very critical like audience that was, and when I realized that, oh no, wait, like no wonder I can't write, because every time I write a word, I have this like critical body of people that I'm imagining that's, like totally disapproving of every word that I write. And when I reshifted the audience that I was writing for, even if it was that for like the few people that are great fans, my book was like very specific academically at the time. It really shifted the way that I was flowing in my writing, and it gave me more confidence to take risks in the things I was trying to say, which I knew I could edit later, So it's not only the expectations, societal expectations, or these cliches about writers and what writing is, but I think it's also who we imagine as the people that are the readers of our words, that makes a difference on how we write.
It's like, I think writing is quite like almost like quite a vulnerable thing, right? So that fear follows an awful lot of people. I was mentoring someone recently, and she wanted to start writing this fantasy book, and she kind of plotted and planned. She kind of kept coming to me about like how she was like mapping it out, and actually what really held her up was the fact that she just needed to start. Like she was
Right.
so caught up in all of this mapping and planning and kind of making it as good as it possibly could be, that she'd kind of forgotten that one point of, you actually need to start writing it, and it's not going to write itself. Like literally just start. Once you've started, you can come back and fix it, you can make as many changes as you like, but actually if you don't start, you've got nothing. And honestly, so many times we had that conversation, and every time we came away from it, I literally said to her, I was like, now you just got to start writing.
Every journey begins with the first step. You got to take it.
Exactly.
All right. I don't have any lofty accolades, but if someone ever says like, "Hey, I hear you do writing, you're still doing it." If I wanted to get into writing and I wanted to tell this story, what would I do? And I have a lot of the same advice: just do it. And to me, you know, writing a whole book, uh, it's a daunting task. You're creating something out of nothing, but it's a giant task, a lot like climbing a mountain or eating an elephant. And it's either one step at a time or one bite at a time. You're not trying to do it all at once.
I always find it really interesting when people often think, oh, but I haven't got any formal training in how to write stories. I haven't got a qualification in it. I don't know where to start. And then you think, well, actually, if you look at like a lot of the big names that you now see in the industries, none of them have formal training, and none of them knew how to do it. They literally just started, and they kind of crafted a story from instinct and a skill of a good story to tell, and that kind of a thing. And so a lot of people get caught up on that idea that actually they need to somehow learn the secrets behind it, when actually a good story is a good story. It just needs to be told. Which also often gets in the way, I think, when it comes to like making that start, getting over that, and just making a start on something.
That is a really good point. A lot of budding writers, they will sit on a bunch of good ideas because like they've eaten or absorbed, processed a certain type of medium. They really like this show on the CW, but if it could be told in this way, oh my gosh, what a cash cow it would be. That's great. Write down your plot points, do everything, but then start actually writing. Like, get that idea from your head onto a media that you can communicate that to other people. It's a lot easier to communicate black and white trying to communicate with ether and sounds.
For sure. And it's also the only way that you'll ever get better, the only way that you'll ever improve and get to
That
a
is
point.
an excellent,
Yeah.
excellent point.
I think a lot of people make the mistake of comparing where they're at to where other people are at, or getting caught up in all of that. And I think that, like, it's important to recognize that it is your own personal journey with your craft. I find that kind of very, it's unfavorable to think in those terms, because it really just gets you stuck. And I think embracing where you're at in your journey is an important part of that growth as well.
Yeah, and all arts is subjective, right? So what doesn't work for some people is like perfect for others. I personally absolutely love it when I get really bad reviews through, because I actually find them so entertaining in understanding what it is that people don't like. Like, I find people very easy to say what they do like, but actually to find someone who says the things that they really don't like or what didn't click with them, I find them even more interesting, and really relish them. But it's all subjective. You'll always find your own niche of people that enjoy that particular form of art. It's just a case of finding them.
Yeah, Natasha, that's the same for me, especially because I write it in an endangered language. So very few people are actually reading the book. So sometimes it's always just like, oh yeah, that's really good. And when people are like, I really didn't like this. And I was like, please tell me, yes. What didn't work for you there? So I feel the same way. I always feel like I want to be challenged, as long as obviously it's constructive, but I welcome those kind of challenges as well. Yeah.
Is there anything happening, like questions from the audience for this panel? No? Okay, awesome. Sounds like you are sleeping. Oh. You so
Let's see, we do have one question in the chat, just one. Pizza wants to know, how do I quit my job without losing money?
Obviously, you write a bestseller.
yeah.
Oh, bing, bang, boom, so simple.
Exactly.
And then obviously with the bestseller, you hire the best marketing team, you get it out on major primetime TV, and become a household name.
I thought the obvious answer was you marry a millionaire or something like that, and they provide you all the money, and then you can do all your writing.
Right.
No? That's so simple.
Might be more, if you can find a job that doesn't drain you, because my first job was writing advertising copy, and I was putting all of my creativity and my writing energy into writing advertising copy, and there was just nothing left for my writing, my creative writing. So that was, yes, that was rough. And I'm not going to, I thought, I just got out of college with a creative writing degree. Here's a writing job, perfect. But no, that did not work out at all. So finding the right job can sometimes be, you know, a lot of help if the job you have is leaving you drained, or if it's just hard on you in any way, to try and find something different. Maybe it's not necessarily in your field or doing what you dream of doing, but something that leaves you room in your life to write.
I think that's really good advice. I work as a content director, so spend all of my day working with written word, to then many days feel like I don't want to do any more writing because that's what I've spent most of my day doing. So I think that's actually really, really valuable advice around that.
All right, we are probably we're almost out of time here. Do our panelists want to leave like one more tidbit or tip or something like that? That kind of like, if you had to say one thing to one person, what would you say?
Have patience with yourself, have grace with yourself. You're not always going to find the perfect balance. You're not always going to accomplish as much as you want to accomplish in a day, and don't let that discourage you.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I like that. Sure. Anyone else have anything else to add before I move on?
Yeah, a little goes a long way, you know, like if you do something for a long enough time, you become an expert at it. So, you know, that same kind of, just following up what Rebecca said, it's important to stay determined too, especially if you're passionate about something.
Yeah, fantastic. Natasha, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was actually kind of echoing these two in the sense of perseverance is essentially your best friend, and I think a lot of it simply comes down to who actually perseveres versus who kind of trails off for an end result. So yeah, determination, and kind of like it's a marathon, not a sprint. What's the long game here? And just kind of persevering as much as possible.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you so much for joining our panel and presenting. I really appreciate that. You had lots of good information, so I'm excited that to have you guys here. So thank you again, and I will be closing off this
Just one moment.
recording. So yes.
Just one moment. Rebecca, Tamar, Natasha, do you guys have any like social media handles you want to just shamelessly plug right here before we go?
Sure.
Yeah, you can drop it in the channel. That would be great. We can pour it in there too. That works.
Fantastic. We got Instagram, Twitter.
I'm totally stalking. I'm just kidding. No, you want to follow, yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Really good.
All you guys on here.
Yay. We have got socials to follow. Very good. Okay, cool. So thank you again for coming, and I will end this recording here.
Thank you all.